listeners, and welcome back to another episode of Down a Rabbit Hole with CCSUAREZ. That is me. Thanks for coming back. On last week's episode, we started to fall down the rabbit hole of the religious cult Jehovah's Witness. In today's episode, I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing an ex-Jehovah's Witness. For privacy purposes, for her own mental well-being, we will be concealing her identity, and please respect that. The opinions expressed in this episode do not necessarily reflect those of the Down a Rabbit Hole podcast. Sensitive topics are discussed. Viewer discretion is advised. Just a quick show note before we get started. I did have quite a few people, whether it was in my DMs on Instagram, feel free to follow the podcast over on Instagram, Down a Rabbit Hole Podcast. I had a couple people saying things like, I played sports with Jehovah's Witness. This isn't true. Where did you get this information? Mostly all of the information that I did go over in last week's episode was directly from the Jehovah's Witness website, jw.org. And then also information that I have come across while doing many interviews with current Jehovah's Witness and ex-Jehovah's Witness as well. And then also consuming quite a lot of content regarding this cult as well. Not every single congregation, not every single family does things the same way. Please do keep that in mind as we go forward. Enough with disclaimers. Let's go ahead and get into the second episode of this podcast. First and foremost, like I said, I do appreciate you having this interview with me to include in the podcast. We are protecting your identity. Can you go into that a little bit of what would possibly happen if, it got out that you did this interview, or what kind of repercussions that you would be dealing with?
When I decided to leave the Jehovah's Witness religion, I did what you call a fading, which is basically disassociating myself without necessarily putting in a letter asking to be disassociated or being called out for like a serious offense, like a sin or whatever it is, because Jehovah's Witnesses practice shunning, and that would involve my close friends and family shunning me, and I don't want to do that. Of course, it's not something that I want happening, and me coming forward with my story and explaining what my experience is outside of like being interviewed by the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses is in itself an act of apostasy, which is grounds for shunning.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't live with my mother. My mom, me and my brother we're the ones that, like, I don't include myself into that, but we're the ones that were Jehovah's Witnesses within our family. And because I don't live under the same roof as them, they would be under the strong recommendation / obligation to cut all ties with me.
Of course. Okay.
Yeah. And I don't want to put them in that situation because I know that it would be very heartbreaking for them, and I don't want to put them in a situation where they have to choose. So
of course,
I just decided to fade away.
Yeah, just the casual drift, as I call it.
Yes, that's definitely what happened over time. I just drifted.
Yeah.
And eventually I just stood my ground with everybody and said, like, look, I don't identify as Jehovah's Witness anymore. I don't want to talk about it. Like, I respect your stance. If you want to cut off ties with me, that's fine. But yeah, that's pretty much where I stand.
Okay. Is this something that you were born into, or that you and your mom and your brother all joined together? How did you get into it?
My mother and I immigrated here when I was about 3 or 4. She was an evangelist prior to coming to Jehovah's Witness. Somebody preached to her at a bus stop when I was maybe 6 or 7. She started a Bible study on the spot. She got baptized when I was, I would say 12, but it's the only religion. I wasn't born into it, but it's the only religion I've ever known. My brother was born into it. He's younger than me. Yeah.
Wow. And I know you said, obviously, just like how I had mentioned in part 1 of this series, it can be a lot harder for anyone in a cult, but anyone in this type of organization that does practice shunning to leave because of the fear of, obviously no one wants to be cut off from their family, right? That's extremely hard. And being cut off from your friends. And that happens in multi-level marketing companies too.
Yes.
obviously, because those are commercial cults as well. But do you have friends outside of the organization?
I do. I always did, and I was always called out for it the entire time that I grew up. I did always have friends outside of the Jehovah's Witness community. My mother was never very big on me just being within it. In all honesty, I don't think she was ever okay with me getting baptized, because I remember her. She never congratulated me when I got baptized at the age of 19. No, she never did. She was. I could tell on her face that she wasn't happy about it. I think she could tell that I was doing it for the wrong reasons, which is because when you grow up in a cult, it becomes part of your identity. It becomes part of who you are. Yes, I had friends outside of the community, but at the same time, everything revolved around it. I was taught from a very young age that everything had to be centered, prioritized around my religion. And for a very long time, even until now, I'm still dealing with questions as to where, not necessarily as to where I made the right decision or not, because I know that I'm better off for leaving, but it's a very long process to detach your identity from the religion that you were brought up in. And
of course.
Yeah. And I can only imagine for, certain Jehovah's Witnesses that never interacted. I know people that were homeschooled because they didn't want, because their parents didn't want their children to grow up with the influence of the world. I wasn't. I was, I went to public school, and even then I find it hard.
Yeah.
I can only imagine.
Were you able to, celebrate birthdays or play sports? I mean, there's so many things that Jehovah's Witnesses can't do. Yeah. A list of things they can do seems like it would just be a lot easier to go over.
I remember celebrating Christmas up until my mother got baptized, celebrating my birthday a couple times, but from, let's say, my tweens until now, never. In high school, I was already in, pretty certain of the way that I had to live my life, because I was already a Jehovah's Witness by then. But I was also a cheerleader. I was on the cheerleading team in high school.
You're not allowed to do that.
No, my mother was never against it. Again, she just saw that I wanted to do it, and she didn't see anything bad about it. I particularly never did it for the competition aspect of it. But then when I grew up and I started doing having my own Bible study done by another, I call her like sister, another person within the congregation I was in, she sat me down and told me that I shouldn't be doing cheerleading on the account that it was a spirit of competition, and that's not something that witnesses do. Fortunately, I wasn't too fazed by it. I kind of looked at her and was like, okay, that's weird. And I know the reasons as to why I'm doing it. I liked it. It's a great environment. Mm-hmm. But I have to admit that when that year ended, I didn't go back. I was always the odd man out, never going to birthday celebrations. I've never voted in my life. I could never have a particular stance, and I come from a country that is very divided politically. I'm Venezuelan.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah. So very polarized politically. Politics is a daily topic within my family, and it's divided people within my family, people that are for it or against it. Always been very weird to constantly reminding yourself that you can't have an opinion on the world that you live in. I'm like, this is something that is affecting the people that I love.
And a lot of people don't realize that it's not only, they can't talk about it. It's that you cannot have an opinion.
I can't have I could never have an opinion about it. I could never tell you that I was for or against the president that was, that is ruling the country, if you want to call it like that. Even now, like nothing. No, I'm not even supposed to have a stance on whether or not I'm for or against the vaccine, because it's a personal decision. I'm like, no, I have a very clear opinion of what people should do. Am I here to force it on anybody? No, but I have an opinion, and you can't keep me from having an opinion. But yeah, it's very censored, very, keep it under wrap, and it's a very odd way of growing up, and it's even harder to come to the realization that you grew up in a cult. Remember, I had messaged you telling you like, hey, I just want to thank you, because this whole movement, anti-MLM movement, is what really made me realize how similar commercial cults are with religious cults. And I had an epiphany when I'm like, shit, I'm in a cult. What do I do? Because for the longest time, I would hear you talk about, you like kind of drop here and there, Jehovah's Witnesses are in a cult. I know that I have a following that are Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're saying that they're not. Like, I'm not here to, ruffle any feathers, but we're just going to leave it at that. And I was one of them. I'm like, I don't know what she's talking about. I don't feel restricted in any way. I can live my life the way I want. to, but within the principles of the Bible. And little by little, I was like, oh crap, I grew up my entire life with people telling me on the account of the Bible that I had to dress a certain way, say certain things, take certain life decisions that are affecting me up to this day very badly. I don't trust my intuition with a lot of things, and it's in part because I was never allowed to trust my gut. I always had to refer to what the Bible said. It's quite the how can you call it,
a mind fuck.
It's quite the process to build that trust within yourself again, and to being able to trust your intuition again, and to call things for what they are.
Yes. And I'm happy that I could even be a part of, trying to help you get through that. I mean, I'm not only honored, but I don't know if you saw my feelings almost came out. I almost started crying when you said that. And I appreciate you. Like, I'm just going to thank you a billion more times for even doing this interview with me. And I know how, really second guessing yourself, not even just second guessing yourself, but being really in an internal battle with yourself and not knowing if you can trust yourself is, I've been through that in my life before, and it is very, very, very challenging and can just shatter you completely. So I hope that you do have, a support system of internet friends, not only who, the spicy dumplings, but, others who listen to the podcast. I mean, I was just going through the comments under the episode, which if you are listening to this, you don't have to listen on YouTube. You can listen over on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, where you listen to your podcast. But I was looking at that, and there's so many testimonials in there and just people sharing, and me realizing, oh my God, this is a lot worse. I can research and read all these things, but when it comes from real people, obviously, I know y'all are typing you're real, and I have a relationship with a lot of you, and I am able to recognize your usernames and things like that. And so I'll see that, and people saying, yeah, my biological father, I didn't necessarily want to be baptized, so he disowned me from 2 states away. He had these papers served to me randomly. My aunt told my dad that, or my grandfather, she told everyone that he was dead because he left the cult for another religion. And
I have friends that has happened to. I have a friend who used to go to meetings with his grandma when he was little, and then when he grew up and his parents split up, he ended up living with his dad because his mom could not stomach the idea that he didn't want to be a witness, and so she decided to just detach herself altogether from her children. And him and his sister barely talked to their mother, and I'm like, how can you claim to be a good Christian and do this to your own creation? Like, they came from you created them, and on the account of what? Of God, you're going to deny the existence of the very people you're supposed to love and sacrifice for. To me, it's just, that's why I always, whenever the topic comes around with either people that are witnesses that I've told what my situation is right now, or I always tell them I consider myself extremely fortunate for the way that things have gone down so far. I told my mother what my stance was. It took me 30 years. It took me 30 years, and I would say out of those 30 years, a good decade of internal conflict, and to come clean about what was going on in my mind and what I wanted to do with my life. And she was surprisingly very much okay with it, in the sense that she told me, your life, I'm not here to tell you what to do with your life. I gave you the tools the best way that I knew how, and if you don't want it, you don't have to do it for me. It doesn't make me love you any less. And I burst out in tears when she told me that. And I told her, you do realize that the way that I grew up is thinking that if I didn't behave or act or believe certain things, I would not be loved. Like, my entire life, my value as a person, my value as a Christian, my value as a woman, everything has been conditional. Everything. And it's very hard to overcome that. I'm in therapy for it. It's very, very hard. To think that somebody who is close to you is supposed to love you unconditionally is an idea that I still have a lot of struggle with.
I'm very happy to hear that you are in therapy for it. Yeah. Very happy to hear that. That was actually something that I was going to ask you about. Were you worried that your mom was going to have to disconnect, or not have to, but make that decision to disconnect from you?
Yes, I'm still worried to this day that it has impacted our relationship in ways that I won't ever be able to mend, if I can say it like that. it's sad when the way that you were raised and the praise that you were given and the approval that was given to you is very much linked to your religious accomplishments, and to be told day in day out that if you ever leave, or if you ever commit a sin and don't repent and you're disfellowship, you're out on your own. And if then after that, if Armageddon comes and you're not in good standing with God, I don't even want to call him Jehovah, because I don't even believe that's God's name. It's very hard to believe that people are not going to abandon you, and that I've come to realize that I have severe abandonment issues. I live in constant fear that people are going to abandon me if they find out who I really am. I was actually talking to my therapist about it yesterday, and I started crying. I was like, shit, how can I have been raised in such a supposedly nurturing support system and feel so lonely for having my own ideals and for having my own stance on what I think is the best way to live my own life. I'm like, I'm not a bad person. I'm not doing anything bad. I haven't, done something that I can come back from. So why do I always feel like so worthless? Like I'm not good enough. And that's exactly how, and I'm sorry to say this, anybody who's listening to the podcast who is a Jehovah's Witness, that is how you are conditioned to stay in. You are always taught that you are never good enough on your own. Never. That you as an individual, not worth it. Not unless you give everything that you accomplish, credit to God, or nothing on your own. You're never good enough on your own. It's really sad.
That's one of the many, cult aspects of it. What if there was, one scenario, one situation, or even maybe more than one that you can remember? Would you say there was a cultiest moment that maybe comes to mind?
I don't have a specific, it's more like a day-to-day type of thing. Let's say I'm having a regular conversation with a friend who is a witness as well, and something good happens to them, or they're doing well, or their family's healthy or whatever, and it's like, oh, well, it's all thanks to Jehovah. I'm like, why are you doing this? Why are you constantly, why do you have to go that way? And a culty. Yeah, I have a culty moment. My big sister, she lives in Peru, and we talk a lot. She's on her own. She started life on her own over there, so she has very big moments of loneliness. We talk a lot, and for a while, I was pushing the idea of a Bible study on her, and I shared that intention that I had with a friend who is no longer my friend. And when that person asked me how, my big sister was doing, if she was still studying, and I told her, no, my sister's not interested in a Bible study, and I respect it and whatever. This girl goes and says, oh, well, it's never too late. Jehovah reads good hearts. And I'm like, are you implying that my sister is not a good person because she doesn't want to have a Bible study? I'm like, I have to respect her decision. No, doesn't the Bible say that God doesn't force anyone, that we all have free will? So why are you saying that, oh, it's not too late, implying that, she might die any day soon if the end of the world comes? I'm like, what the fuck is your problem? And it's just the way that everybody talks. That's the ideal of how people talk.
As I was doing research over the past few months and interviewing people, I came to the conclusion this is a doomsday cult.
Yes.
And I hadn't, really seen anyone, really call it that.
You are always warned to be on your absolute best behavior, and to always be on alert for signs that indicate that the world is about to end. And to me, now that I see it with a lot more perspective and with a lot more critical thinking, I'm like, what in the Jonestown is going on here? I'm like,
yes,
I can send you videos of recordings of meetings of people at the very top of the organization telling anyone listening that they have to put aside their critical thinking and not go against any direction that the organization is telling them, aka certain things might not make sense to you, but you still have to do it if you want to survive, because that's what having faith in God means. I'm like, so you're telling me that if this whole Jim Jones thing that happened was to reoccur, and that if the organization said that the end of the world is about to happen, and that the only way to survive is to create a town in the jungle from where you can't leave, is that what what you guys are going to do? I'm like, are you guys listening to yourselves? This makes absolutely no sense to me. I'm like, wow, I can, it's word for word. I'm not even making it up. People who are witnesses that are probably saying she's a liar, listen to the podcast, can listen it for themselves. That's exactly what they say.
Well, I did have a lot of, I don't know if you saw my Instagram story. I had a lot of
A
people
lot
in
of
my
people telling you, yeah.
in my
I sent you a
Instagram.
message. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
if I had a dollar for every time I heard,
Yeah.
I've been told this is not going to end well for you. This is
Yeah.
not the right decision. You are practicing independent thinking. That is not good.
God
You are
forbid.
being. I'm like, God forbid I have an opinion. I've been told so many times, so many times. A lot of people that have heard about what I did are like, I am so sad, and I'm like, why are you sad? And I'm not. Like, it's not like I have cancer or a missing limb. I'm happy, and I tell everybody. I'm like, I'm happy with my decision. I'm at peace with my decision. If you only knew the weight of my shoulders that it represents, to be able to come into my own and like, tell people this is what I stand for and this is not okay. And they don't see it.
No, but
It's like people in MLM, they don't see it.
exactly. It's the us versus them and the conditioning, like you said. Have you ever had, I know you said it was only really you and your mom and your brother who were in the organization, but have you ever had to, it doesn't seem like you would have done that anyways, but have you ever been pushed to cut someone off that was disfellowshipped?
I never did. I never had the balls. People that I knew personally who were disfellowshipped, of course, the frequency of my interactions with those people would much less.
Mm-hmm.
But I never I could never. I never did. I always did it like on the down low. But if they reached out to me, I would reach out. I would respond. If they wanted to meet, I would meet with them. If they wanted to talk. I'm like, I cannot stomach the idea of being part of the people that are going to isolate you in such a way. I can't. I'm like, this is what, I'm sorry to hear, and this might sound very dramatic, but this is what drives people to commit suicide. Like, you can't.
Yeah.
And there's been instances of people feeling so lonely that that's what they resort to, and I would never want to have that kind of death on my conscience. Never, never.
There are a lot of examples of that, not only in Jehovah's Witness, but also in Mormonism, and then in Scientology as well. There are so many in Scientology. They can't get out. And that one, your money is not only your life, your religion, your family, but your money especially is wrapped up into it, because they have that mandatory tithing kind of, but it's also like it's not, you're paying to be a part of it, which in Jehovah's Witness, did you experience any of that?
Funny enough, Charles D. Russell, the person that founded the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses, always took the stance of saying we will never purposely collect money, because if we do, that means that this is not God's calling, and therefore this is not the way that we should go into. And funny enough, today it's very different. It's subtle shaming, in the sense like, how dare you not give your money in order for the organization to have generous funds. I'm like, generous funds for what? To settlements for child abuse?
Yep, that's what I was gonna say.
I'm gonna go that route. Like, what do you want my money for? What exactly it is that you want my money for? Because I don't even want to think that any of the money that I have ever given would go to that kind of cause. That makes me sick.
And
I didn't know about that until I left. That was never something.
Well, because of the controlled information of what you're allowed to read and look at. It does seem that a lot of the times when you are growing up in the cult, what it seems like you were, I don't want to say blessed in the cult but to have your mother who
she always had the mentality of like, we might be part of the same religion, but that does not mean that you get access to what goes on behind the closed doors of my house. I'm like, I thank her for that every single day.
It sounds like she tried to, at least, to protect you and have you have some remnants of a normal childhood. But I mean, even look at that. It seems like you had slightly a more normal childhood than someone else maybe growing up in Jehovah's Witness, but still it's still was very traumatic for you. So even a quote better situation or scenario is still awful, which is just horrible. It really seems that the founder was not really not liking like the fear mongering of, like, oh, you're going to go to hell and all this. Like he was scared of it, which is so ironic that, he didn't like that. So he like was taking that out of his teachings and focusing on, be a good person, get into heaven, all that. And really, if you think about it, that aspect of like religion or Christianity is more inviting, instead of like, you're going to go to hell if you, if you don't join, or it's like, hey, go to heaven with us. So that seems better. But then it's crazy what it's evolved into now is Jesus is going to blow up the earth, and only a certain amount of people are going to get to go up with him and become kings.
And everybody else is going to have 1,000 years to get their shit together, because at the end of the 1,000 years there's going to be a second, what you call like a final, kind of like at the last level of like Mario Bros, like a video game, and just like anybody who doesn't pass that level, well, you don't make it into the definite paradise. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, there was a video claiming that people who are homosexuals will have 1,000 years to come to the understanding that God's standards do not allow that. And so you have 1,000 years to suppress your homosexuality.
Sounds like Jesus is just trying to smooch, is what he's trying to do.
Like, what is this?
Yeah, that's very rough as well. I mean, look at me, I'm bisexual and, Presbyterian Christian. So yeah,
that's
very,
the other thing.
Very supported by my pastor. She loves me.
Good for you. I have never, been able to discuss like my sexuality per se with people in my family or whatever, because I just didn't want to alarm anybody. But my thing is like, I've dabbled into the whole, like I've felt, attraction towards a woman, and I've dabbled into having sex with a woman. Does that mean that I would definitely throw myself into a relationship with a woman? I've never really I've never seen the appeal, but that doesn't mean that I haven't thought about it. And that's the thing, that within Jehovah's Witnesses, you're very much repressed in terms of your sexuality. No porn, no masturbation, no casual dating.
Wait a minute.
No.
That wasn't I wasn't on the don'ts list that I read. No masturbation.
No masturbation.
How miserable are all these people?
What do you think? Why do you think a lot of witnesses get married at the age of 18, 19, and then by the age of 25, it's a complete train wreck?
Yeah, and that was one thing that is so sad to me as well. People being stuck in very abusive relationships, whether it's the wife or the husband that's being abused. That's if your spouse develops a mental health condition that you are not prepared for, and that sadly puts a strain on your marriage to the extent that you think that it's best for you to leave, you are not allowed to leave, because if you do divorce this person, in the eyes of the congregation, you are not divorced. And if you start your life with somebody else, then you are committing adultery and you get this fellowship. Same thing goes for abusive spouses. I know of a couple who's like the mother of the woman in the couple. Her mother was never able to remarry, or she never lived with her husband for half her life because he went bonkers and like beat her up. So they separated. They didn't live together, but she never remarried. She ended her life by herself. So you're able to separate.
You can separate in situations where your life is at risk. Let's say if your spouse is purposely neglecting you to the point where your life is in danger, in terms of abuse,
but you
and
can't,
whatnot, but you can't divorce.
That is, what's the, like at that point it's just a legality, right?
It is. It's a technicality, and it is. I've come to realize that a lot of this are imaginary rules.
Yes, absolutely.
It's all in your head, honestly.
Yes. Well, and then also just people, the inconsistencies with it as well. You can even see it in the, my DMs of people saying, oh, I have like 5 Jehovah's Witness in my, the gymnastics class that I teach, or I played sports with these people. And it's like, okay, well, them's are the rules. I didn't make them. Jehovah did, apparently. Yeah. So it's
and it's like, show me black and white in the Bible. Where does it say it? Because that's technically what Jehovah's Witnesses are all about. It's all Bible centered.
Yes.
But where is it? No, it's an indirect rule coming from an organization who decides to interpret the Bible that way.
Yes, which is funny that they are so black and white, but their black and white rules come from their interpretation of the Bible, which
exactly,
theologists have even said, like, no, they're interpreting it wrong. Like, it's what they're saying it says, it doesn't say that, which is just horrible.
And it puts people's lives in danger.
It
Like
does.
the whole two witness rule is get
Like,
out of here with that.
when are you ever going to have an eyewitness to sexual abuse? Like, the person would have to
Exactly.
be in the room then, and that's not how that happens.
Basically, the person who was abused counts as a witness, but then because it only happens when two people are there, the other witness would technically be the abuser, and the abuser is never going to come clean about it.
No,
So,
it's disgusting.
and for anybody out there who thinks that, it's not the elder's responsibility to call out on the authorities and whatnot, I'm sorry, but when you are taught day and night that the religious community that you are in has your best interests at heart, that they only want what's best for you, and that they watch over you, and that you owe them everything that's on your mind, and you owe them all your secrets, they are responsible.
Yeah,
They are responsible.
I mean, even it's not like there's, like, patient doctor confidentiality, but even with that, or psychiatrists or anyone like that, I mean, there's if you are,
There's always a certain level of confidentiality, but
yes,
if you're committing a crime, or if you're covering a
exactly.
crime that is putting somebody else's life in danger, they have to report it.
Exactly. And I'm not even sure where in the Bible it says this, but it
It's an
says
old ass rule. I think it's an Old Testament rule. Which I'm like,
fuck the Old
didn't Jesus,
Testament.
I'm like, didn't Jesus come to everybody and said, like, hear my words, the Old Testament doesn't apply anymore. These are the principles that you should go by. Love yourself, love your God, love your neighbor. What
Don't,
happened?
Jesus said, "Don't be a dick." Even so, there's somewhere in the Bible, I can't remember where it is, and I'll I was about to say I'll find it. No, I won't. I don't care that much. I'm not trying to look through that book. There's somewhere that it says, like, if you like if someone is doing something horrible and you see it and you don't, at least try to do something about it, whether it's, you intervening, which, okay, don't put yourself in danger,
Mhm,
or, you reporting it to authorities. If you don't do that,
mhm,
if you
mhm,
turn a blind eye, then
mhm,
you are just as bad as the person who was
mhm,
doing said thing. And
mhm. When that process is used is when you find out that your friends are committing sins, that they're not things that they're doing things that they're not supposed to do. So you have to corner them basically into outing themselves to the elders so they can get proper counsel and discipline. And
the
if they don't, then you have to snitch. You have to put their privacy and their personal matters out for like the elders to know. I'm like, this whole thing, that's another thing that I wanted to tell you about. When I was telling those who were noticing that I wasn't going to meetings anymore, or that I was, let's say, posting, happy birthday to people that, that I knew on Instagram, they're like, what is going on? And I would tell them, hey,
they're like, "What's happy birthday mean?"
yeah, exactly. They're like, I'm like, I'm inactive. Here's where I stand. I want my decision respected. Some of them, the first thing that they would say is, "Have you told the elders yet?" And I was like, I don't owe the elders shit. I'm like, I don't owe them anything. Why are you telling me that I have to come forward? I'm like, you want to know if I told them? Yes, I told them. But you want to know why I told them? Because I don't want them pestering me with their phone calls to see how I'm doing. Like, I don't want it. So whenever one of them called, coincidentally, a couple of weeks after I decided that, this was not for me anymore, I told them, like, this is not going to come off as a surprise. I am not, I don't consider myself a Jehovah's Witness anymore. Um, this is my stance. No, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want counsel. I don't want anything. Please don't call me again. Tell the elders where I stand, because if they call, I will be ignoring their calls too. I'm like, that's the only reason why I did it. I don't want people bothering me with this.
Mhm.
And the entire idea that I owe my secrets, my personal life, my personal struggles to somebody within the congregation is just stupid. I don't owe them anything.
It is. It takes over, your entire life. I mean, for instance, and not to, compare, my Christianity to, Jehovah's Witness, but that's the only thing I've experienced really, other than like my husband's church that he went to growing up.
Mhm.
But if I don't, I've been busy for the past like month and a half. I haven't been to church. Do you think my pastor or my friends that also go to that same church or my family members are going to be like, "Where have you been? We haven't seen you." No. they don't care. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's nice when, you know, we all go to church and, you know, hear the sermon together, and it's a, you know, it's typically always a good one because our pastors are awesome. But then we go to brunch after and have mimosas and have Sunday fun day and get drunk after. Like that's the jam. Start off with Jesus, end up with a drunk Sunday fun day. But I feel like that, like, come as you are. If you don't come around often, that's okay. Just know that you're loved and you can come back. Like more
Yeah.
of the inviting instead of the demanding and the fear mongering. You said
Yeah.
that you hadn't been to meetings. What exactly are these meetings? Are they
Well,
sermons or what?
yeah, pretty much. So Jehovah's Witness today have 2 meetings a week. One of them is during the week. It's focused on the door-to-door service, or modified version right now because of what we're going through. And then Sunday or Saturday, depending on one on the weekend, which is they study an article within the magazine called The Watchtower, which is supposedly an auxiliary, like it's a kind of like a
Like a
an
devotional?
additional tool to better better have a better understanding of what the Bible principles are. And I'm like,
No,
nah, that's not it.
it's
That's not it at
propaganda.
all.
Girl, it's propaganda. Let's be
Yeah,
honest.
it
That's
really is.
exactly that.
It
See,
really is.
I didn't know that
I've
they do
seen things,
that.
and yeah, it's every week. That's on top of conventions. That's on top of daily service. That's on top of the daily text you're about to read. You should read, which is other people call it devotionals.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
That's on top.
I
That's on
have,
top of personal Bible study. That's on top
yeah.
of on top of on top. Yeah, it's
Yeah, I
a
mean,
lot.
I have like a devotional like app, and then there's also
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
like my mom got me a good one for Christmas. But I mean, I'll do it like I'm either reading that or one of my for like 15 to 30 minutes outside every morning if it like feels good, and I'm like in my robe and my egg chair, like reading a
Hmm.
book or something, and drinking
But
my
see,
energy
the way
drink.
that you see it is that it's something that you do if you feel that it's going to do you good and if you want to do it. For me, it was a matter of, oh, XYZ is not doing well in my life. And the first thing that they would circle back to is like, well, how's your spiritual health? Are you doing all the things that you're supposed to do? Because maybe the answer isn't there, but if you don't read it, how do you expect God to help you if you don't ingest spiritual food? And I'm like, get the fuck out of here. Like,
What in the Monate upline is that? Would you say that would be kind of one of the things that
yes.
triggered you, or whenever any of us, I don't know who else you watch, but when
I
we would
watch I watch you all. I watch all of you guys. I
everyone.
started I'll tell you, like, the way that I came about to know about your channel is because my mom's friend obviously started freaking Monet, and
Ugh.
I was being a little bit, just disinterested in the whole idea, and my mom was kind of like trying to support her friend, so she told me that you should sign up as a VIP just because she's looking for new clients. I'm like, okay, sure. I didn't even think of what that would mean in terms of money. Um, and they were talking, no, the discount, the this and this, and I'm like, at the end, I was like, what fucking discount? This
Yeah.
order is
Yeah.
$250. What discount? I still ordered it because I was like, sure, whatever, why not? I tried the products. I hated them, absolutely hated them. My hair looked great for about 15 minutes, and then it was an oily mess for 6 months.
Yep.
It was horrible. And I kind of got pissed off when I tried to cancel my account and realized that I had signed up for 3 flagship
Mhm.
orders, and that if I left there was a penalty. And I'm like, what is this? This doesn't. I'm like, this is just. So why am I being cornered into giving you guys money over and over again? This is stupid. So I googled. No, I searched in the YouTube bar Monet, and your video is the first one that popped up.
Hell yeah.
It's like, thinking of joining Monet, watch this before. I'm like, okay, sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's literally the title of the
Yeah.
good job,
Yeah.
girl.
And so I watched that. Then I went down the rabbit hole. Your channel recommended Isabella. Isabella recommended Diana. Diana recommended Savannah Marie. Savannah Marie recommended Jessica Hickson. Jessica Hickson recommended
Squad.
who else? And then Julie Joe. Then
My girl.
Erin Bees. I love Erin, by the way. She's fantastic.
Yes.
I had a chat with her. She's really cool. Um, and the one that impacted me the most in terms of like really seeing the parallel between commercial cults such as Monet, Arbonne, was Savannah Marie's dissection of the bite model. And when I saw that, I was like, damn it. now I'm confronted with this truth that I can't unlearn. What do I do
Yep.
about it?
And it's so interesting because it's the not only, controlling that information, right? That's what the bite model is all about.
Hmm.
That control, but
That's when I started to realize, I'm like, shit, I've been told my entire life that I cannot learn about my own religion outside of the structure that I'm given. Like,
yep.
apostate videos, apostate material, never, never,
Hmm.
and never. I would always turn off the TV. I would never listen to an interview. The very few times that I stumbled upon one, I'm like, they're taking it too far.
Hmm.
And
It's
I'm
just
like,
negativity.
okay,
It's just haters. They just don't get it.
that's exactly it. Or it's like, it's people out to get you. They don't know what they're
Hmm.
talking about. And then
It's
it's
the
funny enough,
devil.
it really is, like, it really is the work of the devil. This is the occult. Like, they sold their souls to Satan, like things like that. That's exactly what you're taught. And I'm not lying. Again, people who are listening to this podcast, who are Jehovah's Witnesses, who are saying that I'm taking it too far, that is exactly what the videos of the organization say. That
Hmm.
apostates, word for word, this is what they say: apostates will more often than not mix a little bit of truth with a lot of lies
Hmm.
to bring shade to Jehovah's name or something like that. That they are um, almost kind of like calling them like disgruntled employees,
But when
pretty
in
much.
reality, that's what
It's
cults in general. But what Jehovah's Witness does is there's a little bit of quote truth from the Bible, and then they see they everything is black and white, but black and white in terms of how they interpret it, which is
hmm
that right there is an oxymoron. Just to go back a second, what you were
hmm
saying about oh well, are you doing this spiritually? Are you doing that? Are you doing this? It reminds me, it's just almost word for word. It was mirroring how uplines and MLMs
hmm
will blame the lack of your success on your lack of personal development and self-help. And
it's exactly the same
it's
thing.
the same thing. It really is crazy, and people don't realize how, I mean, the similarities are mind-boggling.
And
It's truly
it's
crazy.
it's always, it's with the same goal. It's to suppress your critical thinking
Hmm.
and to kind of like soothe yourself back into think that you're doing the right thing, and it's not true. You're really just suppressing all the little alarms going off
Hmm.
in your head, thinking like, why do I feel so conflicted? Why do I feel like I'm not good enough? Why do I feel like this? And what you learn in Jehovah's Witness material is pretty much just saying like, you can think for yourself. You
Hmm.
have to trust that Jehovah knows what's best, and that they're using the organization to do so, and that all the little indirect rules that don't seem to make any sense, it's because Jehovah loves you, and it's a loving disposition. And like, and then when things don't seem to make sense, I learned very recently that shunning was a practice that was criticized by the Jehovah's Witnesses when the Catholic Church was doing it, and and then they went back. They kind of backtracked, and in the 50s, I think it's in the 50s. That's when it was implemented. Before that, it was criticized.
Hmm. Well, and
Jehovah's
it's
Witnesses celebrated Christmas until very like in the 1920s, I think.
well, and then also when really everything was being exposed regarding the Catholic Church and child. I mean, not only exploitation, but sexual abuse and molestation and just horrible, horrible, horrific acts. This was, feeling a little high and mighty and being like, "Oh, couldn't be us." Realistically, it's been y'all, but worse.
Yeah,
Like,
it's just that we live in a time and day where information is a lot more accessible, and
thank
things
God.
are things are coming out into the light, as the Jehovah's Witnesses like to say that
Hmm.
nothing is hidden in the eyes of God. And I'm like, yeah, even your own shortcomings.
Personally, if I was told constantly growing up that the end times are coming and that I have to be perfect or else Jesus is going to blow up the earth with me on it. Obviously that's not what they believe, but it's a joke. That would be so mentally damaging. How did you feel about that? How was that experience for you?
I was always told that there was no point in getting higher education, or to have big finances, or to dream big, or to want to achieve anything in this world, because I would probably not even be old enough to see it.
A definitive date that they said, because I know one of
No.
the Okay, because I think
No, because Jehovah's Witnesses before have been very intense on getting dates, and they never got it right. And then at some point, they were just like, "We are in the last days of the last
yeah,
days." That's how I grew up. I
yeah,
grew up. I grew up being told I was in the last days. Then when I became
okay,
a teenager, I was in the last days of the last days. And then now they're talking like the last days of the last days of the last days. I'm like, you guys are
Jesus.
making no sense. But it's this doomsday kind of belief that that leaves everybody on a hyper vigilant
Mhm.
kind of state.
And it's
And
fear mongering. I mean,
it is.
that's terrifying
It is because
think of.
it takes away your ability to think critically so that when they give you instructions that make no sense, you don't question them. You don't question them.
That's
It's
not
pretty
good.
intense.
I hope you know how impressive it is how self-aware you are
I have
with
a really hard time understanding that.
extremely impressive how self-aware you are. So you should be very, very proud of that, proud of yourself for being able to acknowledge like I got some shit, I gotta work it out. I'm going to a professional
Yeah.
and you know, not only with that, but with I mean the stuff with your mom too. I mean it obviously is very intense. One less intense question I have for you.
Mhm.
Did you go door to door?
Yes. God.
How let's get into that.
Yeah, go for it.
How often did you have to do that? Like how many times per week?
At least once. At least
Gross.
once. So I know it was very, and again, my mother was never forceful on it, but it was badly seen if you didn't show up for Saturday morning service.
Which
Uh,
Saturday morning service is going door to door. That's what
yeah,
it is.
it was the minimum that you could do.
That
Yeah,
that's not a service. That's called that's legally
yeah.
called canvassing. That's all it
Yeah,
is.
it really is, and I know that I know of certain restrictions in certain countries regarding like collecting information such
Hmm.
as people's addresses, phone numbers, names. It's not legal. I had a pad with all the addresses, and if we knew the name of the person, we would mark it down, and if we left a magazine, we would mark down what magazine, and like very similarly to an MLM. It was like kind of
Yep.
like a spreadsheet of what
Hmm.
did we talk about, what points did I see what pain points did I see that I could cover in order to persuade them to accept a Bible study. Are they are they financially struggling? Do they have children? Is it a single mom? A lot of things very similarly to MLMs, like a very, I'm gonna say it, that you guys, the way that I call it too, is like it's very predatory.
Yes.
It's
Very.
it's very predatory. Like
It goes
I would
past salesy.
never I would never want somebody to study me to the extent of, looking for that one thing, one weakness that will allow me to be persuaded to study. It's
Exactly.
it's horrible. And I'm pretty sure that's exactly what they did to my mom. She had just gotten here.
Hmm.
She had just emigrated from another country. She didn't have a lot of friends,
Hmm.
and she was in search for a religious community because she was always a very spiritual person, and that's how they got her.
That's
That's It's the way I see it now. I didn't see it like that back then. But yeah, service was part of our, it was just never our strength as a family, so it was never something that was really a big deal if we didn't go. I was out in service door to door pretty much from the moment that I started attending meetings. And then when I was around the age of 12 or 13, I went up to the elders and told them that I wanted to be an unbaptized publisher, which is pretty much somebody who turns in their time monthly to pretty much give an account or a report of how many hours they were out preaching or doing a Bible study. How many magazines did you give?
so
How many?
an overachiever, basically.
Yeah. And then that is pretty much the first step towards baptism.
Hmm.
And then I got baptized when I was 19.
Interesting.
And I'm a very, like, now, because I got out of my shell because I got out of that damn religion. So, but I'm a very outgoing and outspoken person. Um, Even if it makes me very nervous, I'm very good at I'm talking to strangers and to
Hmm.
being charming and being finding a laughing thing that we can get along on.
Yeah.
Um, so I was always told I had a lot of potential to be a pioneer, which is somebody who um, gives kind of an oath to do, what's it called? I think it's 80 hours of service, 80 hours of per month. Per
That's
month.
that's a part-time job.
It's a part time job. It's literally a part time job.
And
And yeah.
you're not getting paid. And you're going door to door to
And
tell
you're
people,
going door to door in your neighborhood.
"Oh, that's embarrassing."
It
That's
wasn't it's in
that's
your neighborhood.
worse.
It's not even in it's not even in like an unknown place. It's in your own neighborhood, your own territory. So
And you go to, I mean, it's the same houses every time, isn't it?
it's the same houses every time. You go back multiple times if they're not home. You go back at different times if they're not home. Any chance they are not the type of people who want to be rude to you, so they kind of accept magazines just to, let you off easy. They will come back and pester you every month.
I don't think I ever said it publicly, but I might have said it on like a live stream. But after I received those letters that were in Spanish, I was fascinated by it. I was like, what the hell is this guy saying now? And so I went over it, and then just to make sure like I got the translation right, because I mean I read through it, and I was like, okay, I was like, I have a gist of what this person's saying. I was like, visual earthquake, what? I was like, Tony, I gotta translate this whole thing. I want to know what the hell he's talking about. Some guy warning me about an earthquake in Spanish.
I think there's a passage of the Bible that says like within the last days there's going to be more earthquakes.
It's what it was.
More like natural phenomena.
Yeah, disasters.
I'm like, girl, it's just.
He was saying because of COVID, essentially, he's like, and there's been volcanoes erupting, and I'm like, that's called nature. There's been
and pandemics have happened before too.
Yeah, start talking the bubonic plague, get it together.
Yeah,
but it was just fascinating, and I was like, oh my god. So I sent a picture to Tony's dad so he could make sure I got the because his first language is Spanish, but he was like, he's like, that's hilarious. He's like, I don't even get them in Spanish. He's like, I've gotten them in English before, and I was like, what the hell? This is like everyone gets these. It's like,
it's most likely because of where you're located. There's a big Spanish demographic, like a Latino demographic. Well, I think so. There's probably a lot of Spanish-speaking halls around where you are. And you're part of their territory.
Yeah, I think.
And they saw Suarez, so they're like, yeah, sure, whatever.
Exactly. And they saw Anthony being, Tony's first name. So I mean, that's a Hispanic name as well.
Yeah. Funny enough, it's the same thing with me. When I moved out and I moved here, my last name is, it's a Hispanic last, and I always like when people were preaching without knowing, that back in the day I was already a witness. It's in Spanish, and I was just like, what? What?
Gay.
Yeah. I'm like, I got you later. I'm all too familiar with your content.
Yeah. And that was around the time I was like starting like my anti-MLM research. And then I fell down, this rabbit hole. And that's 2 years ago, actually, when I came up with the idea for this podcast. And I wanted this one to be, the first topic I did. And then like 2 months ago, I always get an email from UPS whenever I get, something at my PO box. And I went and I opened it and I was like, what the fuck is this? It's just a card. Okay. It's like a little one. I was like, all right. And I love it.
Oh, it's handwritten. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll hang that shit on my fridge. I love those. And even I'm like, Tony, look at this on blah, blah. And so obviously it's just like nice. It's like fan mail. It's cool. Makes me feel closer to y'all. I love it, cause I'm a narcissist. So, so I like always love those. Oh my God. Okay, great. I thought it was gonna be something else. And then I open it and it's a Jehovah's Witness like pamphlet. And I'm like,
yeah. What color was it? Is it blue, yellow, purple?
I think it was purple.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Because there's 4 of them.
Purple's ringing a bell. And I was thinking, I was like, this is to my PO box that is only associated with my YouTube channel. And this is only after.
Yeah. It's probably somebody who listens to your channel who was like,
it's not a cult.
Like, if you're going to talk about it, you better be informed. Let me send you some material.
And then just sending me the jw.org website. Like, what? So I think that was bold of them, but also, it shows the lack of self-awareness. I'm not going to join your cult.
And funny enough, you were saying in the first part of this podcast, the first part as a list of don'ts is you can't attend any other type of religious what's it called? You can't go. You can't go to any church. You can't attend to like. I once attended a wedding at a Catholic church. I felt so weird.
Really?
Because I had never stepped into a church before. I was like, this is odd. I'm like, is this how y'all practice your religion? I'm like, wow, okay, all right.
Was it like a very like traditional Catholic church, like the beautiful ones?
Oh, gorgeous. It was just like
a cathedral.
And I saw like the pews and all that. And I was just like, and the candles in the back. And I don't know what any of it means. And I was just like, wow. Very differently.
They are gorgeous. Don't get me wrong.
But there was like a sense of shame for me being there, But at the same time, I'm like, one thing doesn't go with the other. It's not because I'm in a religious establishment of a religion that I don't practice that I can't be happy for my friends who are getting married and they decide to get married here.
Mm-hmm.
How is that any different than me inviting them to meeting to meet with?
Exactly. Yeah.
Why can it be both ways? Why do I have to persuade you that my religion is better than yours or is the religion to follow, but I cannot have the the kind of open mind that will be willing to witness what is good about yours, because that's the point of view that I have today. It's just, I'm like, every religion at the end of the day is trying to interpret the same kind of truth the best way they know how.
Yeah.
And I think it's very rich of Jehovah's Witnesses to think that they hold the right one. Very, like, I'm like, wow, you're kind of forgetting that you're just as imperfect and flawed as the rest of us.
I mean, I just think it's bold of them to even have a magazine that has that they have printed the words Armageddon on the front of it. It's like, what are y'all okay? The answer is no. I already know the answer. It's no, but
yeah. You know that those magazines are the Awake and the Watchtower are the two pieces of literature that are the most distributed, that had the highest rate of distribution on the planet. That's how, and they're the most translated, I think, as well. Not to bring any, I don't think it's anything to be proud of. I think it's
no, it just shows how, I mean, they're trying to recruit, to save everyone. But my thing is, what's the point of trying to recruit more people and save everyone if only 144,000 are going to?
But my thing, the understanding of that prophecy in the book of Revelation is that 144 people are called to the
in the first round, the first draft.
Yeah, they're kind of called to a heavenly, another type of paradise, which is like the celestial one where Jesus and God are, and they will be supervising the rest of us on paradise on earth and whatnot. But I'm just like, this is stupid. I'm like, this is just, think about it as a house with 2 stories. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense.
God, a house. There aren't levels.
Yeah,
there aren't
that's exactly
levels.
how they're saying that. That's exactly how they're saying, like, there's levels to this. I'm like, okay. And they're saying, like, if you're wondering if your calling is celestial and not with the rest of all mortals, then you just don't have it, because it's supposed to be a calling that you get when you get baptized. I'm like, all right, okay. Well, funny enough, a lot of people that claim to have that calling, a lot of them sadly have some kind of mental issue going on.
I mean, you got to have something going on to, I think, to believe in something so radical. If that's I know that sounds horrible, but I mean, just to, and again, as a Christian myself, not to shame anyone, of course, and that's why there's always the disclaimer. I say always. This is the second episode. The disclaimer at the beginning of this podcast. It's just to believe something so, I don't want to say crazy because that's mean, but
no, but I think the brainwashing makes it so that by the time you believe everything, you don't realize how distorted it is.
Correct. And you aren't going to second guess.
I've never been so open and so willing to talk about my religion now that I'm out of it. When I was in it, I was always so ashamed of disclaiming it, of saying that I was part of it, because the conviction was never there. I was always I knew that I was never 100% convinced. So
I mean, how can you with how ridiculous all of it is, right?
There's some people are, and some people are just, you're encouraged beginning of the school year to tell everybody in front of class that you're a Jehovah's Witness, so they'll leave you alone and not invite you over to holidays or birthdays or things like that.
Or you would at least have to tell your teacher.
When up with the magazines, when my biology
you were
teacher.
Your biology teacher, that's probably the worst person to go to.
Yeah, because of course, like, there was the teaching of evolution when I going around, and that was around the same time that the magazine around evolution and how scientifically accurate the Bible is. I'm doing air quotes for people who are listening, because this is not the case. Like, the Bible, it's very conveniently accurate,
Yes. Again, it's their interpretation. When it comes to going door to door, were you successful in recruiting anyone anyone from going door to door?
I'm very thankful that I wasn't, because I don't know how I would feel knowing that. Don't get me wrong, I thought I was doing the right thing at the time. That's what I was thought I was doing, and but now that I think about it, I'm like, I'm so glad that I was never fully into it, and that I never really followed through with people who I would have to, like, go back to with magazines and whatnot. I never forced anybody. I never tried to persuade anybody. And I never studied with anybody long enough for them to, go all the way through and get baptized. I know a lot of people who have a lot of those scores under their belt, and I would never want to be responsible for taking away somebody's critical thinking ability.
See, again, that's the self-awareness is amazing. Now, if there is a chance that someone who is a Jehovah's Witness is watching this, please understand how valuable you are. Please understand that your feelings are valid. And finally, please understand that you are in a cult. Ask questions. Ask questions to the elders and to yourself. For instance, all of the incorrect Doomsday predictions that were published in the Watchtower, all of the incorrect information that is published in the Watchtower, all of the incorrect information that is on their website. Please do your research. There's a reason why they don't want you to get a higher education. There's a reason why they don't want you to read any outside literature. There's a reason why they are controlling the information that is available to you. Please do not ignore these red flags. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Down a Rabbit Hole podcast with me, CCSUAREZ. I appreciate you listening so very much. If you have a topic suggestion or a rabbit hole you would like me to fall down for an episode of this podcast, please do email me at downarabbitholepodcast@gmail.com. And be sure to rate and review over on Apple Podcasts as well, whether you are listening on YouTube or on Spotify or anywhere else. I would very much appreciate it. I will see you in next week's episode. This podcast is produced and written by Chelsea Suarez. Other producers include Wickham Suarez and Tony Suarez. Artwork for this podcast by Chelsea Suarez and by moon.png on Instagram. Special thanks to all of our YouTube channel members who were really a crucial part in making this podcast happen.